Oh, hello there. It's Marianne Llewell from Southside High School, and I thought I'd make it as cheesy as possible. Shout out to my husband, who is actually holding my iPhone so that I'm able to film this video. Okay, so this is the rationale for gifted education or classroom improvements. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things that really kind of resonated with me over the course of this program before continuing on with the improvements that I have in mind. I have great improvements in mind. Particularly, I was struck by Donna Ford, and we watched a video with her, and then we read a couple of articles. I particularly had one, Needle in a Haystack, about students of color in rural settings. But Donna Ford talked about the achievement gap, and particularly at school, how there's a lack of rigor, and if you have low expectations for students of color, then you are adding to this. And we talk a lot at my school, which is a lower SES school with a very significant population that is students of color. And we talk a lot about rigor and about having fidelity in implementing curricula, and it's a challenge. I'm not gonna pretend like it's not. It is something that we are constantly coming up against, and programs like our AVID program are meant to kind of bridge that gap between what is expected in terms of the curriculum and the rigor that, from a teacher's point of view, these students are capable of hitting, and what they are actually producing, which is sometimes not quite there. In terms of gifted and talented students, maintaining that rigor is absolutely necessary. But there are different ways of doing it too, right? You have to be culturally responsive, and you have to be able to meet their needs while also recognizing the challenges of the community and of sometimes the home, sometimes there's food insecurity, and sometimes you just, in order to be culturally responsible in your classroom, you need to be able to respect your students and create that sense of inclusivity, and make sure that you have an environment that is welcoming. I think that's very important, and I wanted to stress that welcoming environment. I'm going to get back to it because that's what I wanted to talk about. And so when we were looking at the readings for this week, something that stuck out to me in particular was building on Gagné. And Gagné, working out of Université de Québec à Montréal, he has talked a lot about what gifted is versus talented, and how gifts you're born with versus talent is something that you can possibly learn and develop. I had used the Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana model to illustrate Gagné's system. So when you're looking at things like project-based learning and choice and authentic assessments, you're building on Gagné. And developing potential talent that has consistently been acknowledged as a goal of gifted education, right? Like developing that talent, identifying it and developing it so that folks can continue to reach their potential. But, this is a huge but, there is a concern that traditional conceptions of giftedness do not respond to the changing demographics of the US school population. And again, I come back to that question of low SES and the students of color, which have a different cultural background than I do. Often I have ML students, again, very different cultural background than where I'm from in Canada and Atlantic Canada. But there is a way that I think as a teacher I can respond to that, and that's my challenge going forward, because I wanted to talk about my rationale here for my gifted and talented classroom. I am teaching this year. I've got English 1, I've got AP History, and I've got IB History. So that's a very wide range of topics. And I'm trying to draw on principles of UDL and on principles of choice, and of trying to really kind of encourage students to be more independent thinkers and looking more towards questions of reflection and that metacognitive element. But I also want my classroom to be a safe space. So I'm doing things like providing snacks, making sure that there's protein, making sure that there's, granola bars, trying to provide school supplies whenever possible, so that there isn't a question of, well, I don't have a pencil and I'm too embarrassed to ask, so I'm not going to do this work. Just stuff is there, it's accessible for everybody. Do your stuff and get on. I have comfortable chairs in my classroom. I've got some pillows that you can stretch out. If you're feeling that you need to get up, you can go in and be at the standing desk or use one of the little rocking chairs. I am currently on the lookout for a sofa. This is my goal, to put a nice love seat in there so it's all nice and comfy. I think that this kind of cultural adaptation to your classroom, to make it a more welcoming physical environment, and to make sure that the needs are being met down lower on that pyramid, will enable your students to reach higher, because they don't have to worry about the basics. And then once that's taken care of and that trust is there, that respect is there, then you can push your students towards higher order questions and that depth of knowledge and being able to participate more fully, because the trust is there, you're building on it. And so that's where I'm starting. I'm going to work on building relationships, and I'm going to work on building that trust. And we will go from there in my gifted and talented classroom, which is mostly set up, which is good because we start tomorrow. And it's going to be an evolving thing over the course of the year, as it always is. So that's my rationale. Thanks for listening.